Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow, and perhaps even check out our Patreon. By now, most of you will know that I'm a big fan of model railways, and for the last few years, me and some of my friends have taken layouts to exhibit to the Statfold Barn Model Railway show, starting off with my O gauge layout Skull, of which we all had a go operating. For the next year, we decided to up our game and to go smaller, each building a micro layout with the scenic area no bigger than an A4 sheet of paper to really show what you could achieve in the hobby in a minimal amount of space. And for this year, we got asked back again and decided to do something bigger, much bigger, and really up our game. The newly formed Nearly Competent Modelers Association have decided that we will enter a modular layout. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about when I say a modular layout, it is a layout comprised of loads of different sections or modules, and for this each member of the association will build their own module. The idea is that every single module has the same entry and exit point so that it can be arranged in any order and will always go together. So the track is set 10mm from the front of the board, and then whatever goes on in the middle is entirely up to you, as long as there is that track going in and that track going out. It will be on 4mm cork to keep it all uniform height, and the scenics at each end will be of the same material so it all kind of blends together. Every module will be fitted with a rail liner, which will ensure that the railway actually comes together and allows rolling stock to pass over it without issues. Without this, there was no chance that this plan would actually work. There's going to be a central control area, and this is going to be a station. It's the only module that we have any plans for that trains will be able to come in and pass. So we'll have something leaving from both ends of the module and they'll pass there. We don't know what the station is going to be, how it's going to look, or what else will be there, but that's what we've said. Whoever is doing the centre will do a station. The layout is going to be operated as a DC layout, mostly because most of us are still on DC, and it will allow us to field a greater variety of rolling stock. And of course, you can get away with running DCC on DC for a short period of time. The layout is going to be set in modern day, but the theme is of a preservation railway, which basically means we can run whatever we want with whatever we want and justify it because it's preservation. And the idea is that the layout will be set up completely at random bar the central unit, and then between Saturday and Sunday we will then take it apart and rebuild it into a new configuration. So if you do both the Saturday and the Sunday, you will see two different versions of the layout. That's the plan anyway. Operation will be made from 4 people. That will be 2 people operating the fiddle yard at either end, getting trains ready to travel on the layout and sorting out arrivals, and then 2 operators bringing said train from the fiddle yard all the way along to that central station. From there, they'll swap over controls and take the arrival and take it back to their fiddle yards. A lot of the modules will also have independent railways separate from that main control, so there'll be shunting and things moving about there as well for added entertainment. The idea behind this is that this layout could be assembled as a long one, as we're hoping to have at Statfold, or in a smaller configuration and taken to different shows around the country. And so we're hoping to be able to take this to a number of shows as things develop, which will be exciting if it actually happens. And the most exciting thing about all of this is that none of us will see each other's module until the time of the show. So the first time that this will all come together will be the Friday night on Friday the 12th of April, as we put everything together ready for the show on the 13th and 14th of April. Now, this may sound like a terrible idea, and that's probably because it is. So throughout this mini-series, you're going to be seeing me and a selection of the other guys as part of the Nearly Competent Modelers Association putting together their boards. And to say that I have some trepidation about what's going to happen would be something of an understatement. But before we go much further, I'd like to introduce you to the sponsor of this series, and that is Grange & Hodder, and they are a manufacturer of baseboards. And for each of us who are taking part in this challenge, we all have one of their baseboards, which means for a starting point, we all know that they are of a unified design, shape, and size, which means they will all go together. Whether anything else works is beside the point. All of the baseboards and the fiddle yards that you see during this series were supplied to us by Grange & Hodder, and I cannot recommend them enough. It has made this project possible by having a single unified system to start from, and they were an absolute joy to work with. They're seriously really good guys, so really recommend checking them out if you want to build yourself a layout or embark on a larger project like this. Solid baseboard, great place to start. So there's a link over in the video description so you can go check out yourself and see all of the different baseboards that they do. For doing a project like this, it is an invaluable starting place. So a massive great thank you to them for being part of this adventure. And for those of you who have seen lots of my videos here in my office, you'll have noticed that there is this package alongside me saying fragile, and that is my baseboard. And the first thing we need to do before we can start doing any kind of model railway building is to build a baseboard.
And that meant taking over the dining room table to open up the box and find out just what was inside. And turns out there's a lot of pieces of wood. And once I'd gone through and worked out what everything was, sorted it all into individual components to make life easier, I had a pile of stuff to start putting a board together with. Most of the components were blindingly obvious what they were meant to be. This bit, for instance, is going to be the top of the board on which I'm going to lay my track. The instructions, however, left something to be desired, because it's all just written sentences and it takes a little bit to get your head around. I was expecting a step-by-step instructions rather than a quarter of a page. Once you've read through everything and you've come to understand it, the instructions are correct and they're quite clear. I was just expecting it to be a bit easier. And whilst I was putting my GCSEs in English and DT to good use, Charles was getting prepared to build himself.
We need to sort out how it actually fits together. I don't know if it does yet. I've just drawn some random pictures previously. It might work.
David, on the other hand, had thrown caution to the wind, pulled everything out of the box and just started to assemble it in the hopes that it was all going to go together in the correct way. Charles, on the other hand, was taking a more methodical approach to getting everything out of the box.
The build begins. I've got a 1200 by 600, a 900 by 600, and then another 1200 by 600 in here with some control panel parts and some leg packs. So hopefully 2 of these boards become a station, and if there's time I'll do a separate module, but maybe I won't, seeing as it's now just after Christmas. The Statfold show that this is meant to be getting ready for is April. Maybe we'll get a station, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But we'll start with getting the boards together.
Which was exactly what I was trying to do with a dry run, trying to see how everything went together before I got out the glue. David, on the other hand, had just gone for it, and his board was rapidly taking shape. Meanwhile, I was running into difficulties trying to get everything to stay together long enough for me to work out if that was actually how it was meant to go. Charles, however, had gone and got proper tools and clamped everything together and got it all absolutely spot on. He'd also gone about it in a different way to me, building the internal structure first and then putting the outside walls on. He'd even been competent enough to remember to put the glue on first. David was also storming ahead with his board construction, screwing it all together and thus eliminating the need for clamps and glue, with the others making sterling progress. It was probably time that I actually tried to build my board properly, and with my dry assembly very nearly complete, I was a few steps away from actually breaking out the glue. The last thing I needed to do was to get the corner reinforcement bits out, put some bolts through to locate them into the right place, and install them in the board just to ensure that it was indeed all tickety-boo. Meanwhile, Charles was making rather infuriatingly good progress and had got the top on his baseboard. These things were now starting to look how they were meant to.
One board complete, one in final drying, and then that will be both boards for the station module complete for the basic construction. Still a lot of stuff to do.
Charles was right, there was a lot to do, but at least now I was starting to glue things together. And it all just came together without any issues whatsoever. Well, with relatively few issues. And a bit of brute force. Elsewhere, David was feeling smug as he completed his baseboard as well. But I wasn't actually that far behind and got ready to add the final layer of glue to attach the top of the baseboard onto the frame. Now this next step was crucial. As long as I'd got everything square, these should just drop on. They've all got self-locating slots cut in them, so it should just go together. It turns out that maybe I'd got something a little bit off, because it needed a little bit of jimmery-pokery and a bit of persuasion for this piece to actually go on top. But after talking to it very nicely and explaining that it was going to go together and it had no choice in the matter, the thing eventually decided that it would yield and came together. Although at this point I was getting very, very angry with it.
Now, for the purpose of actually lining all of these modules up together, they butt onto each other here, continue the whole run down, go as far as you want with them, but only if you line your track up correctly. So when we bought these, or when we were sorting out these to buy where we're going to get them from, we spoke to Grange and Hodder and asked them as to what we could do, as to whether they could do something with their laser cutter as they did it, and very kindly, we've got these marks put on where we want the main join to be between the baseboards. So this is where the rails will go to, and that's the center point and 2 rails. So on each end we've got marks here and here, so you can get them lined up there. And then we've left all of this bit clear because you don't, this bit is kind of largely irrelevant down the middle, so long as you're in the right sort of place. And then again at the end here, so at both ends board should just butt up to it, and with the, along with the rail joiners, which will just make sure that they're locked into place exactly here, it should all match up and hopefully function correctly. Now, to help with joining these boards together, we had a couple of spare ones, which well, they weren't spare as such. We bought them for the traverser module to go between the traverser and the main layout. But we've got a couple of boards that were for that purpose. So one of them has been repurposed like this. So this has got the little rail joiner connectors that we're using on from Model Tech. You solder the rail here by removing the last few sleepers, solder the track itself into there, got all the pins down the middle. And what these do is they just overhang ever so slightly at the ends with these little bits here. So when your track butts up against it, these little bits here just slot inside of them. And then that gives us the knowledge that these are all locked in place together here. Rails should be pretty much slap bang on there, and that at each end of the module here and here, it should marry up to this quite nicely when you bolt it together.
And you might think, well, that's the end of this, but it's not. As I didn't have any fancy clamps like Charles, I was just putting some tacks in to hold everything together. What followed in my frustration as the glue decided to let go of various parts of my baseboard was a zealous overkill of attacking the board with more pins. I put more than I need in there by about 50 times, but I am very sure now that it will never, ever, ever, ever come apart, and for that I'm quite proud. It was also rather therapeutic, and once I'd got the thing together, I was feeling quite pleased, which meant there was only one thing left to do, and that was to put the extra supports in to give the baseboard a little more rigidity underneath. And just like that, my baseboard was completed, and that also brings this first episode of this series to an end. So I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I hope you've got a good overview of what we're trying to achieve, and we hope to see you at Statfold Barn. And if you have enjoyed this one, how about clicking somewhere over there for one of our other model railway things, or over there for one of the Statfold Barn shows. You can see the kind of thing that they do. And there we have it, a finished baseboard for you to look at. Isn't it a thing of beauty? Join us next time for when we start looking about what we're actually going to do with this featureless landscape. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Ta-ra!